everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at artistfirst.com. And now here they are. It's Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And it is a quintuple Monday.
True.
It's true. This show, in the U.S., we had a holiday over the weekend, and that holiday was yesterday. It's Labor Day, so today is officially known as Quintuple Monday because everybody is tired, hungover, and tired, and hungover. And nothing wants to work. Our tech didn't work. Other tech didn't work. But we're here, and we're not complaining. We're just noting the current moment of now.
Yes,
which
indeed.
Sucks a little.
What?
It's the moment, you see, this is what, let me digress for just a moment, because Triple Monday or whatever, the moment of now doesn't always have to be good.
True.
All you have, what you have is the moment of now, and then you have your reaction to it. We've said that many, many, many different times. And so you can be happy in the moment of now, but you can note without prejudice or without identifying with it, not saying, well, I'm unhappy, to say this is a sucky moment of now. And the thing that you notice, it sucks, but it's going to change.
Right.
And so here we are. In the next moment of now. Sucking a little less, little tiny bit. And tonight we are doing part 2 in honor of Labor Day of our prison series. Power to the people.
Oh my.
Because last week, as I'm sure regular listeners will remember, we had a prison of the mind, and that was Dogma, and we talked quite a bit about Dogma and about rigidity in belief systems and many different types of belief systems and how they really interfere with our experience of the now and with our experience of knowledge and of living in the world. But tonight, really at the end of that show, Margaret, I think we kind of stumbled into tonight's topic, which was the topic of unforgiveness. Mm-hmm. And the reason that's part 2 of the prison series is that unforgiveness is a prison too.
Yes, very much so. Just as mind thoughts will put walls up between you and your experience of what is, and the mind likes to fit things a certain way. There's prejudgment there.
Yep.
And it always aims you back in to the center of your prison, which is what you happen to want or like or dislike in that moment. So understanding that your experiences can bring you to these kind of reactions that don't allow you to take in the moment and what is unfolding in front of you, and basically replay it in your own head, telling yourself a story. So the fact that unforgiveness is also a prison, has a prison really that is really energized. The bars of your prison are energized by the fact that I don't like this, or I don't like you, and I'm never going to forgive you for whatever it may be. But to understand that keeps you in that feeling of resentment.
Yeah, well, as we've said in other contexts, The sentiment that you're feeling is a fragmentation of your persona, of your consciousness, if you will. Not truly, because the consciousness isn't fragmented, but the ego portion of it is fragmented. You mentioned that the prison is energized. It's truly energized by one thing: your own life force. And unforgiveness is the currency by which the ego lassos that life force, because it says, in essence, again, it's with the ego, it's always about me, about I'm never going to forgive or forget this particular grievance, this particular wound. It will forever shape my destiny. I will never be the same. I will never enjoy another moment's peace. And these are things people say, and almost in some ways it's justified again by the ego saying, well, how can I again, we'll go on with the statement. How can I go on and pretend as though that person didn't hurt me, as though this never happened, as though, somehow that they could get away with it,
Right.
And if I act as though the current moment of now is important and I can love again and be again, that I'm letting them go. I'm letting them win.
Right.
These are the ego's phrases, and instead, this is a phrase you may have heard, or folks may have heard this phrase, unforgiveness is the only situation where you take poison hoping the other person will die.
Right.
Basically, you use your own life force to keep alive a fragment of an experience, usually a horrible negative experience.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it alive, keep it fresh, keep it in your present memory, let it warp every present and future moment. Steal from the now. Steal from any experiential joy. And live in that past, and frankly the immutable past. No amount of energy spent in the now can change that past. Yet the ego uses that currency, that how can I let them get away with it? I will never ever forgive them for what they did to me. All about that, and all about anchoring. We've talked about fragment, but you anchor a piece of yourself, sometimes many, many pieces, but just one is enough. Anchor a piece of yourself in the past that cannot go forward. It can't move. It literally is a fragment of your ego that does nothing more than replay and keep fresh that grievance, that wound. And it's a terrible waste, but the ego tells you over and over again that this is worth it, that we must not forgive.
Right. To keep it close.
Close.
To keep it warm.
Literally.
Yeah. And when you look at that, and you can be justified in wanting to hold that. But in the long run, what are you allowing this memory to do to you?
Mm.
Because to heal means that you are going to take a step outside of this memory. And the feeling of, well, if I don't remember, then I'm dishonoring myself, and I'm dishonoring the memory of someone. Maybe this is a trial that you're remembering.
Mm.
and you want to be able to bear witness to what this person has done, whether it's good or bad. But the truth of the matter is that experience, being that vivid, needs to be seen with higher eyes. Instead of it being the eyes of the body in that moment and being completely engaged in the memory, to disengage enough to be able to see it from a higher perspective and to allow yourself to do that, because you won't forget it. That's a fallacy, that somehow you're going to forget it. But what you can do is begin by looking at it from a point of view that takes your perspective into account, as well as the perspective of all those involved in it. And that is quite a discipline to develop, to be able to see through multiple eyes on the situation, because it means that you acknowledge that you may not have seen everything that was going on, mostly because you were involved in that moment, whether it was painful or traumatic. It was that moment.
And Margaret, people say, well, I'm not going to make it as though it was right. Because this is another thing the ego uses. Say, well, if I forgive or if I move on, I'm saying that it was right. And the key here is that forgiving doesn't make it right. It just keeps it from hurting you in the present. The injustice stands on its own. There's two components here. I'll just kind of bring them up now. We can talk about them as we go along. But there's two components here. There's the judgment, and then there's vengeance. And the ego wants to judge, and it wants to be recompensed. It wants vengeance. The ego wants to get its own back, because in the ego's existence, this existential thing which we call the ego, when you wound it, it wants that back. And when the ego says, how can I ever forget? This thing took something from me. This removed my future. This removed my promise. This removed, something precious of mine was taken. And in forgiving, I'm basically saying, well, it wasn't precious. They can have it now. And those drivers, this driver of judgment, this was wrong, and I can never say it was. If I forgive, I'm saying it's right. And that if I let it go, it's as though I'm saying I don't need to be recompensed for this, that it wasn't something that was taken from me. Those two things drive the ego, and they drive it deeper and deeper into this really psychopathy, or rather psychosis, not psychopathy, excuse me, into this psychosis of fixating upon the past wound. And this is a pattern. You can see, and and we all know people whose lives are merely repetitions of long ago past grievances. They'll literally, if you start a conversation with them, almost immediately will go to, this one did this 10 years ago, and this one did this 17 years ago, and this is what happened, and it could have been this way, and if it could have been that way. And the conversation is toxic, and you find yourself wanting to avoid it, because there's nothing there of life. There's nothing there except pain.
Right.
And their need to turn every present situation into remembered pain, and into how this would be different, or how this reminds me of, what happened then. I might bring up also, Margaret, somebody that you spent a lot of time looking at, which was Joyce Myers, but just her story is so evocative of this because she was deeply wounded, abused as a child,
Right.
and then had to come to, in her adulthood, and find a way to reconcile this situation,
Right.
to forgive very publicly. And she found through her struggle and through suffering, and one thing we can also bring up into this is that this causes suffering, and only one who's suffering is you. Through suffering, realized that this was never going to get better unless she let it go and forgave the person who wounded her.
Right.
And then that didn't make it right, but it made it so that she could live.
Right.
You know?
She could actually...
She could go on.
Right. Have a life and not be driven by rage.
Rage. And make everyone around her feel that rage, regardless of whether they had any involvement at all. And 90, most of them had no involvement, but yet they had to feel that rage. That's the ego. It wants you to feel the pain now. And agree with me that this was the most horrible thing that could ever happen to anybody. And don't you understand?
Well, it's just that the realization must come in that you are hurting yourself again. And you're bringing yourself to the point of misery. And that misery is what you wind up sharing with everyone around you.
Everyone.
And you may not even realize that you're doing it. But to come to the realization that you, by hanging on to this and not letting go, are reliving those awful moments. And yes, it will not change the fact that this was wrong. And this was bad. This was evil, in fact. But do you need to go through that again and again and again? And that's the point where you have to give up your ego and say, I can't handle this on my own. I need divine intervention. Otherwise, I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Tully would say that you animate, I think you said this earlier too, you animate the pain body with your own present energy, your own present consciousness, life energy, and you suffer for it constantly. You're in a burning furnace of pain. Every situation of the present moment just triggers another aspect of the pain body, sucks the life out of you, causes suffering in your life. And as he said, and many others have said, I think Myers said this too, you're allowing people who not only don't care about what you're going through, but may in fact be dead, still cause present day suffering in your life, have complete control over you, your emotions, your situation, because of this unforgiveness. You give over, and this is the word, you forgive, because what you've done is you've given over your present day being into the control of these people who hurt you however long ago.
And it's a pattern that presents itself over and over again within you. And I wish I could remember her name now. But she talks about you grow dead trees within you by doing that. They're not trees of life.
Is that mice?
No. Her name will come to me. But to understand that you need to look at this pattern, this dead tree that has no life, but it takes up space. within you.
It shadows the fertile ground you could have.
Mm-hmm. It's taking up life patterns that you could have participated in. It just takes over that space within you. And to let that go, because you deserve to live. You came to this world to live, regardless of what the situation is. And to come to the point of understanding that the situation does not dictate the life that you are. They're two different things. And to ask for help to be able to do that. Because many times it's a reaction. You've been hurt and you just want to curl up, almost a fetal position, and hang on to, okay, whatever this is, it'll be over, I hope it'll be over soon, kind of thing. But to understand that you, as a child of the living God, you, beautiful being, are much more than any circumstance that has been thrown your way. And to claim that you are so much more than what you think, what you feel, and what you've been through. So much more.
And the way to begin to take control is the path of forgiveness. Now, we can talk about it a little bit, but people find it incredibly difficult to forgive.
Yes.
And one of the things that rises up, and this is sort of another one of the ego's tricks, is it says, if we forgive these people, we're basically saying that we didn't care. We didn't care about what they did. It doesn't matter. And the ego says, but it did matter. It does matter. The actual grievance that was done to us was terrible and wrong. And again, with the ego, as Tolle says, the ego wants to be right. And I think you mentioned a little bit earlier that in the situation where the ego is wounded, the ego immediately says that it is right and what is hurting it is de facto wrong. Now, that may be true, in an absolute sense. This person may be doing something heinous and completely evil. But many times, as you said, with the eyes of the greater, you can see that this person themselves was a wounded, fractured being. That this person themselves had his or her own horrible psychotic hang-ups. That you were in the care of a fractured person who didn't have the ability to act in any other way. Tolle says this about his relationship with his father.
His father, yeah.
And in essence, what you're acknowledging when you say to them, "I forgive you," is you're saying, "I'm so sorry that your being was so terribly wounded that you could find no other way to have a relationship than this incredibly toxic, and put me through all this pain, put others through all this pain, put yourself through all this pain. And yes, I suffered. You suffered. But without someone saying, forgive it, let it go, let it be in the past. You have to go away from these situations. You don't want to live there. You don't want to. But that's what unforgiveness does. It makes you live there.
Mm-hmm.
You literally live there. People say, well, this is living rent-free in their head. Yes. If you say this is a horrible situation, I would never want to be in this situation, who could stand this kind of abuse? Yet, your unforgiveness puts you directly back into that situation, replaying the same thing in your head, blow by blow, moment by moment, fear by fear. They talk about post-traumatic stress syndrome or whatever. This is literally having a full motion video recording in your head, which takes you, heart pounding, palpitating, fear, eyes dilated, enraged, wounded, feeling all the pain of 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago.
Right.
And nothing will stop that except one thing. You have to forgive it. You have to say, that was then. My precious now. My need to not be in pain trumps all that. You don't want to waste the next moment of now feeling the pain of 5 decades ago. But yet your ego will love you to do it because it feeds upon that.
Well, it's the most important thing in your head.
Yes.
When you do that. Your ego gets to drive. And to decide that you have had enough and you've wasted enough time and breath and life on this incident, but life, there's so much more for you out there. To be able to grasp that, to understand that, you know what? No, you can't have my moment right now. I choose life. I don't choose old memory. Old memory is death. There is no life in it.
Right. I don't choose to be in the prison that you made for me.
I'm choosing life, and I'm going to explore what's going on. And it may be shaky at first. I get triggered, but I'm determined. You have to make the decision to choose otherwise, choose differently, choose that not to go down the same well-worn path of grievances and resentments and emotions. It's like you've played that over and over again.
You've given them enough. Tell you what, let's take a little break, because this has been pretty heavy. We have been in the prison of the soul of unforgiveness, but we're going to go through the break, and on the other side we're going to talk about forgiveness and how to do it. So let's take a break.
Moonstones and murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income, when a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show. The townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and Murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Devkalion, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hi, this is William B. Davis, the actor who plays the Smoking Man, or did play the Smoking Man on The X-Files. I'm also a writer, director, producer, and I am delighted to tell you that you are listening to the Artists First Radio Network.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman. We'd love to hear from you. Hit us up at dj@artistfirst.com. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
But we will forgive you if you don't write in. And tonight we were talking about forgiveness. Actually, we're talking about the prison of unforgiveness. But I think we've talked enough about how awful unforgiveness is, and we can go into myriads of examples. But just if you take your own experience and just look at it this way, all of us become wounded over the course of our life, whether small or large. If we're lucky enough, we don't have tremendous traumas done to us. But the key thing to realize is that allowing anything in the past to cloud or interfere with the present moment is a disrespecting of your life, your current life. We had a terrible experience with Christopher when Christopher, our son, went into the hospital for leukemia. And what we learned there is many things, of course, but one thing that was extremely clear very early on is that the disease, both his disease and the disease of all the other kids who were there, was not what these kids wanted to be known for. They didn't want to be known as the kid with leukemia. What they wanted to be known was by their name and who they were, and the fact that at this current moment they were having a bad time. But it wasn't the defining thing about them. And to the extent that people treated them differently, made them angry. Yes, right now I can't do what I could do before, but I am not defined by my situation, by my disease. In the same way, if you harbor in your heart and keep very warm and fresh in your memory every grievance, or even a grievance which was done to you a year ago or 10 years ago or 50 years ago, you're letting that run you. It's now what defines you. You're the guy who had X, Y, or Z happen to him. You're not the current vast being who can do anything. You're just the guy who had X, Y, or Z happen, and that's all you are. You diminish yourself. You fit yourself into a box that's easily defined by the world. Oh, they're the kids with leukemia. This is what we do for them, and they dismiss them. Or these are the people who had this type of trauma or whatever, and they dismiss them. And the person who gets to run your life is the person who hurt you. It's the person who gave you this pain, and you're forever memorializing them and their pain in your every present waking moment. That's a type of hell that you have to say to yourself, as Margaret said in the last half hour, I've had enough of this. I'm not going to give you another second of my present existence. And the person that you're forgiving has possibly moved on or passed on. And you're keeping their worst moment and your worst experience alive in your heart. And it's clouding everything about you. It's defining who you are. And if you release it, and now we're going to talk about releasing it, if you forgive the person, you unburden yourself. Forgiveness is to lay the burden down. You're not carrying it anymore. You say to them, yeah, you did this to me. It was wrong. I was hurt. You were hurt. But I'm not going to carry it anymore. You can do whatever the hell you want, but I'm going to forgive you, whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. And you know, there are countless examples of people who have been terribly hurt. One that comes to mind was a horrible tragedy. I believe it was in Amish country, and somebody went into an Amish gathering and shot up the whole place and killed dozens. And there were children involved. It was just horrific. And yet, very quickly, those people came out and literally said, we forgive this man, this incredibly sick individual who came into our community and did these terrible things to us, because if we're going to hold that as that moment for the rest of our lives, then we're the ones who are going to be suffering. They forgave him fully and completely. Did it mean that he had done something right? No. Did it mean that they weren't going to keep that memory alive of the last thing that happened to them or to their kids or whomever? Yeah. And that's the kernel of how difficult it is, and yet how empowering it is. You take your life back. Mm-hmm. You wrest all control from the person who hurt you, and you put it right back in your hands, and you say, you know what, I don't care what you did to me, I forgive you. And it's a stake in the heart of what they actually did to you. You release all that negative energy.
And that's holding a piece of you.
It's holding a piece of you.
You acknowledge that this has happened, but you're not hanging on to it. Mm. It doesn't mean that, again, you say that this is an act that you condone, that you approve of. But what you are saying is, you have no control over me. Mm. I choose, and I choose life. And if it means that I have to clench my teeth and say, I forgive you, then that's a start. Because you're claiming yourself back when you do that. If you understand that resentment, what it actually does is it rips a piece of your soul from you and encapsulates the event with your soul. You literally have your life energy encapsulating that event, that moment. When you say, I've had enough of letting you have my piece of soul, and I claim my soul back, then forgiveness is there, because that event or energy needs to feed off your own soul for it to continue and continue hurting you and anyone around you, causing the pain. Once it's let go, then possibilities open up for other choices for you. And it allows your soul to become whole again instead of fragmented.
Light. You allow light in, and it unburdens you. You become light again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unforgiveness is like a chain. It's not the same thing, but it's like the Scrooge and Marley chain. You forged a chain of bitterness. You forged a chain which is all the fragments of you that you've left behind. You have to drag them along with you. And every one of them requires remembering.
Yes.
Every one of them requires you to remember what happened and to relive.
Yep.
It requires reliving what happened. And as you said, hurting those around you, because whatever that pain is comes roaring up. And in that moment, you're lashing out not at who happens to be in the room with you, but at some at some remembered pain. And you damage those who had nothing to do with that. You damage yourself. All that power is like a coiled spring, and when it's released, it lashes out with all that energy, destroying things around you, destroying your present moment. You break the spring with that forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You say, I'm not going to give you any more energy. Do you remember? Yeah. Do you still have the scar? Absolutely. You can say, there's the scar. You know, there's the nail mark in my hand, if you want to talk about forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's the Christ's nail marks are the memory of those wounds. You don't forget, but you forgive.
Mm-hmm.
You say, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And that's the God Margaret was talking about before. The God perspective is they know not what they do. All of us, in one aspect or another, are wounders as well as the wounded.
Right.
All of us require two things: to forgive and to be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
It's a rare person that goes through life without ever having to require forgiveness. I'm sorry. I did this. And sometimes, even if people don't ask, even if they don't express contrition, people say, well, they never said they were sorry. It doesn't matter. If they never say they're sorry, you still forgive, because that puts you in the position, as Margaret said, of claiming yourself back. You say, well, they never regretted it. Okay. Don't give them the power over your present moment. Don't give them any power over you. I forgive you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
No, it should not be conditioned.
No.
A condition of you forgiving, that they acknowledge what it is. It's like, no, that doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter. You have already decided that this is my life and not yours.
Right.
And I do not give you the power to dictate the state of my being, my heart.
Exactly.
My heart is more important than this that you have done. So I claim mine back.
Right. You'll find this is an interesting superpower. If you begin to forgive those, if you find those who have done grievances to you, and you explicitly or overtly forgive them, whether they're present or not, you can, as some others have done. You forgive people who have passed on. You find peace. You can have a dialogue with that past self and say,
peace.
I forgive this terrible grievance that you did to me. Sometimes you can do it to the person. Sometimes they want nothing to do with you, but yet it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you. And I'm reminded, Margaret just reminded, we haven't even read the quote. We just launched.
Yep.
But you know what? Let's do the quote, because it's a beautiful quote. And I'm not sure who this person is, but they wrote something very nice about unforgiveness.
Okay. Unforgiveness is a prison. It slams the door on new beginnings and entrenches you in your present pain. It chains the heart and stops it from beating. It suffocates joy and paralyzes your ability to move on. Unforgiveness is the cancer of the soul. It slowly eats away the marrow of your existence and impairs your judgment, your personality, and your ability to love again. This is by Michelle McInerney Hammond,
whom I've never heard of before. Yet the sentiment itself is beautiful and completely correct. The part of this that struck me when I read it was this idea that it entrenches you in your present pain. But I would say that it entrenches your present in past pain. I think that's what the true sentiment is that your present becomes almost meaningless, except as it refers to the past. You know, you say, well, if only. Well, it means that the present means nothing. It's all about what happened a year ago, or 5 years ago, or however long ago it was. And you can't be in the present. You can't, as she says also later on in here, you lose your ability to love again. And I would say just you lose your ability to love, because love requires the present heart.
Yes.
Love requires the resonance of heart to heart.
Yes.
And if your heart is entrenched in past pain, or clouded, your judgment and your perceptions are clouded by nothing but pain, you can't love. You can barely exist.
Right.
Your existence is no more than reliving the past.
If you think of your heart as fertile soil, and whatever you put in there is going to grow and to blossom and bear fruit, you would be very careful on what you're planting in there. And when it's resentment, it grows into a very large structure based in anger, resentment, and it can grow into rage. But as you said, if the space in your heart's fertile ground is taken up by weeds or dead things, you will not be able to grow life's experiences, living experiences. So you literally have to pluck all that out and allow your heart to become revitalized so that you can plant new things. It's choosing that moment. Or do you want to have your heart full of things that have no life?
It's a beautiful analogy, because the heart as the garden harkens back to the Garden of Eden, if you will. But the heart is the garden of your present moment.
Yes.
If you allow weeds or dead trees. You mentioned dead trees before. To occupy the space in your heart, you don't have any fertile ground for the present, and in fact, it poisons that ground. I mean, we mentioned earlier, that unforgiveness is the state where you're taking poison, which is that which that person has done to you, that you keep remembering and re-ingesting, and expecting the other person to die.
Right.
And no amount of your present pain will hurt that person.
Right.
You could go and try to physically hurt them. That's not a great idea, but people do these sorts of things, of course. But the point is that your present suffering, which you have over and over again, and has now maybe brought you to the point where you're so enraged that you're going to go and exact vengeance. But prior to all that, you've suffered for years, perhaps, with pain which was only remembered, not in the present moment.
Right. And it's, again, choosing. Do you matter to yourself? It reminds me of Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian way of
you better explain that.
Living. There are 4 statements that you always use whenever you come into a conflict with another. And both of you must say this. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And when the forgiveness is granted, you thank you. And I love you. And even if it's difficult to say, to go through that, because it takes you out of your ego.
Yes.
When you're able to say these 4 statements. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that order. It depends on the situation. But those are the 4 statements, and they are beautiful.
And by the way, taking you out of your ego is the one that puts up the barrier to unforgiveness, because the ego is diminished by forgiveness. It takes that food away from it, that parasitic reliving of the past and that energy, and you diminish your ego, and you live more in the present moment and in your consciousness by forgiving the dead past.
Right. Exactly. And it's not an easy thing to do. You have to be aware, first of all, that you're being triggered by something.
I think it becomes easier as you practice it, like everything. But you know what also has become easier over years? Finding an end to the show.
Okay.
Actually, this is never easy, but forgive us, but the show has come to an end. So I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. Thank you for listening.
And we love you.
Yes, we do.
That was creepy.